So this was the big news story that broke yesterday that everybody was talking about. It's from Yahoo News. The headline, Kidnapping, Assassination, and a London Shootout. Inside the CIA's secret war plans against WikiLeaks. Now, just a little background about myself. In 2016, I was really big on covering the WikiLeaks emails on Twitter. Every morning, I would wake up, read a new batch of those emails, and just highlight the most important ones and share them. They would go viral. I was kind of surprised. That was like my first foray into independent journalism. And now we're going to see just how deep the CIA plot and the US government's plot against Julian Assange has been. I've been protesting since April of this year in DC. I spoke at an event in front of the DOJ. I've been trying really, really, really hard to get leftists to understand that the case of Julian Assange is monumentally important to anti-imperialism. It is like a central problem today that the world is still grappling with. So let's start reading this article a little bit. In 2017, as Julian Assange began his 5th year holed up in Ecuador's embassy in London, the CIA plotted to kidnap the WikiLeaks founder, spurring heated debate among Trump administration officials over the legality and practicality of such operation. Some senior officials inside the CIA and the Trump administration even discussed killing Assange, going so far as to request sketches or options for how to assassinate him. Discussions over kidnapping or killing Assange occurred, quote, at the highest levels of the Trump administration, said a senior counterintelligence official. There seemed to be no boundaries. And so I'm going to explain a little here. There was one incident that actually happened, which very well could be connected to this event. This was in 2018 that this news story broke. As we saw here, they were discussing these things in 2017, the assassination or kidnapping attempts. So they very well might have tried it. So this story here, intruder tried to break into Ecuador embassy to kidnap Julian Assange, claim his legal team. You can see why they feared that was the case. WikiLeaks founder was woken up in the middle of the night by alleged intruder. He foiled the attempted break-in after setting up a booby trap near the window. Julian Assange knew what they were trying to do to him. He was very well aware of the attempts on his life that would have happened. And so, wow, he thought ahead and actually foiled one such possible attempt. Scaffolding was later erected against embassy in Knightsbridge, West London. Supporters of Mr. Assange claim he has been put at risk of abduction by Ecuador. We'll get into that too, the whole spying situation that happened with the security team there. And so that's not even really the most important topic. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit so that you could see somebody did try to break into the Ecuador embassy a year after Trump administration officials were discussing kidnapping or assassinating him. So they very well might have tried it. While Assange has been on the radar of US intelligence agencies for years, these plans for an all-out war against him were sparked by WikiLeaks' ongoing publication of extraordinarily sensitive CIA hacking tools known collectively as Vault 7, which the agency ultimately concluded represented the largest data loss in CIA history. CIA's got a lot of secrecy. I mean, we could do entire videos about their spy operations they've had. President Trump's newly installed CIA director, Mike Pompeo, we're going to watch some videos from that guy, was seeking revenge on WikiLeaks and Assange, who had sought refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy since 2012 to avoid extradition to Sweden on rape allegations he denied. There's a lot of evidence that those allegations were drawn out. He was willing to answer all of the questions to that. I'll have to do a video someday so you can actually see how the Swedish government was basically meddling because they wanted to extradite him to the United States. He was willing to answer all the questions. The women weren't even accusing him of rape. They were accusing him of other things that were much lesser than that. They didn't want these charges to be like that, but that's an aside. Who had sought refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, Pompeo and other top agency leaders were completely detached from reality because they were so embarrassed about Vault 7, said a former Trump national security official. They were seeing blood. The CIA's fury at WikiLeaks led Pompeo to publicly describe the group in 2017 as a, quote, non-state hostile intelligence service. And here, let's watch that video real quick.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It directed Chelsea Manning in her theft of specific secret information. It overwhelmingly focuses on the United States while seeking support from anti-democratic countries and organizations. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
They're yet to find a shred of evidence that Russia was involved with WikiLeaks. The Mueller investigation couldn't find evidence of Russia helping WikiLeaks. I mean, there was an article I read. I don't know if I have it in the list here. They were so adamant about trying to connect him to Russia, and they couldn't find it, that they ended up calling him this non-state hostile intelligence service, because that was like the only way that they could sign off on some of these counter intelligence operations they tried against him. So let's go on. More than just a provocative talking point, the designation opened the door for agency operatives to take far more aggressive actions, treating the organization as it does adversary spy services, former intelligence officials told Yahoo News. Like I was saying, they couldn't connect him to a government itself, and so they gave him this new classification just so they could do these counter spy operations on him. Within months, US spies were monitoring the communications and movements of numerous WikiLeaks personnel, including audio and visual surveillance of Assange himself, according to former officials. Now, I thought this was very interesting that I have a video here. It's from WikiLeaks Twitter page in 2018, again, around the same time period. Release. Infrared footage of covert Julian Assange grab team stakeout operation reading mission briefing notes. Let's just watch this really quickly. There's no audio or anything, so we'll just watch it in here. So you see these guys are sitting in the car outside of the Ecuadorian embassy. This one in the back, right over here, you'll see, yep, there he is reading the pages. Later in the video, you see this guy's looking over here, and he hides his head. So it's very, very, very likely that this was the CIA or paid CIA spies spying on Assange right there. As we demonstrated here, it's evidence. We know for a fact they were doing this. This Yahoo News investigation, based on conversations with more than 30 former US officials, 8 of whom described details of the CIA's proposal to abduct Assange, so we've already showed the attempt on it, reveals for the first time one of the most contentious intelligence debates of the Trump presidency and exposes new details about the US government's war on WikiLeaks. It was a campaign spearheaded by Pompeo that bent important legal structures, potentially jeopardized the Justice Department's work toward prosecuting Assange, and risked a damaging episode in the United Kingdom, the US's closest ally. Now is where the story starts to get really crazy. It's like a spy movie almost. The CIA declined to comment. Pompeo did not respond to requests for comment. Quote, as an American citizen, I find it absolutely outrageous that our government would be contemplating kidnapping or assassinating somebody without any judicial process simply because he had published truthful information. Barry Pollock, Assange's US lawyer, told Yahoo News. Assange is now housed in a London prison as the courts there decide on a US request to extradite the WikiLeaks founder on charges of attempting to help former US Army analyst Chelsea Manning break into a classified computer network and conspiring to obtain and publish classified documents in violation of the Espionage Act. Now, what Julian Assange was doing is no different than what any journalists do. He was trying to help his source conceal her identity so that she could get these documents that she was already planning on taking out. She just didn't want to get caught taking out these documents because, yes, she got tortured. She got put in solitary confinement just for revealing U.S. war crimes. They revealed torture programs in the U.S. They revealed soldiers laughing while killing innocent civilians in Iraq. I mean, and there's way more that was revealed in those Iraq war logs. And those Iraq war logs were published by mainstream outlets like New York Times, like Der Spiegel in Germany. These were journalistic activities that Julian Assange was participating in. My hope, or quote, my hope and expectation is that the UK courts will consider this information and it will further bolster its decision not to extradite to the US, Pollock added. There is no indication that the most extreme measures targeting Assange were ever approved, although I've shown little evidence they might have been, in part because of objections from White House lawyers, but the agency's WikiLeaks proposals so worried some administration officials that they quietly reached out to staffers and members of Congress on the House and Senate Intelligence Committees to alert them to what Pompeo was suggesting. Quote, there were serious intel oversight concerns that were being raised through this escapade, said a Trump national security official. Some National Security Council officials worried that the CIA's proposal to kidnap Assange would not only be illegal, but also jeopardize the prosecution of the WikiLeaks founder. Concerned the CIA's plans would derail a potential criminal case, the Justice Department expedited the drafting of charges against Assange to ensure that they were in place if he were ever brought to the US. In late 2017, in the midst of the debate over kidnapping and other extreme measures, the agency's plans were upended when US officials picked up what they viewed as alarming reports that Russian intelligence operatives were preparing to sneak Assange out of the United Kingdom and spirit him away to Moscow. The intelligence reporting about a possible breakout was viewed as credible at the highest levels of the US government. At the time, Ecuadorian officials had begun efforts to grant Assange diplomatic status as part of a scheme to give him cover to leave the embassy and fly to Moscow to serve in the country's Russia mission. Now, I haven't seen any evidence that he was going to Russia. What I've seen is evidence that Ecuador was giving him a diplomatic passport so that he could go to Ecuador. But that was foiled by the CIA spying on him. And I think I have that later here. In response, the CIA and the White House began preparing for a number of scenarios to foil Assange's Russian departure plans, according to 3 former officials. Those included potential gun battles with Kremlin operatives on the streets of London, crashing a car into a Russian diplomatic vehicle, transporting Assange and then grabbing him, and shooting out the tires of a Russian plane carrying Assange before it could take off for Moscow. US officials asked their British counterparts to do the shooting if gunfire was required, and the British agreed, according to a former senior administration official. I mean, this is human rights disaster. This is like them going so far to attack a journalist, them going so far to hide their crimes against humanity, that they were willing to do anything, even if it included shooting people, poisoning people, kidnapping people. That is what they do when they don't want us to know their secrets. Quote, we had all sorts of reasons to believe he was contemplating getting the hell out of there, said the former senior administration official. It was going to be like a Prison Break movie. The intrigue over a potential Assange escape set off a wild scramble among rival spy services in London. American, British, and Russian agencies, among others, stationed undercover operatives around the Ecuadorian embassy. In the Russians' case, it was to facilitate a breakout. For the US and allied services, it was to block such an escape. Quote, it was beyond comical, said the former senior official. Got to the point where every human being in a 3-block radius was working for one of the intelligence services, whether they were street sweepers or police officers or security guards. And so I think this is interesting too. I'm just going to pull this up here. So we already watched that video. So now we have this video of British police standing outside of the Ecuadorian embassy. And let's look at what they were looking at, because it tells us just how far back this plan goes. It was not just the Trump administration. It actually goes back beyond to the Obama administration. We'll see on this document here. So we got this police officer handing a binder over. What's the binder say? Extradition of Julian Assange, Operation Kudo. When's the date? 2015. They've been planning to extradite Assange since 2015. Obama didn't press the charges. He decided not to go ahead with it. But the entire reason why Assange never left that embassy is because they suspected that they had sealed extradition charges waiting for him so that as soon as he walked out, if he went to Sweden to stand trial there, as soon as he left, he was worried he was going to be kidnapped. And this shows it was very, 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 very likely. So let's go on. I don't want to read all of it because this is a really long article. So let's just see for the next most important parts. Later that year, WikiLeaks also published several caches of classified and sensitive US government documents related to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as more than 250,000 US diplomatic cables. The US keeps a lot of things secret, huh? Assange was hailed in some circles as a hero and in others as a villain. For US intelligence and law enforcement agencies, the question was how to deal with the group, which operated differently than typical news outlets. Quote, "The problem posed by WikiLeaks was there wasn't anything like it," said a former intelligence official. How to define WikiLeaks has long confounded everyone from government officials to press advocates. Some view it as an independent journalistic institution. I do as well. I think it's pretty clear that they are. While others have asserted it is a handmaiden to foreign spy services. No, it's to show the public what our governments are doing, the secrets they keep from us. They lie to us blatantly. And let's give an example. Even Mike Pompeo, the guy that we've been talking about in this video, what does he say about CIA and lying?
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
I mean, they admit it. The CIA's job is to lie. The CIA's job is to trick us, trick the public into doing what they want us to, into going into a regime change war operation they want. They don't want us to know the truth because if we know the truth, we're going to be against that war. The CIA shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist at all. JFK was assassinated shortly after he spoke about how he wished the CIA didn't exist. He wanted to crush it up and blow it into the wind. Now here we are, decades later, and it's still lying. It's still trying to kidnap and kill journalists. It is still doing war crimes for US empire. So let's go on. But the Obama administration, fearful of the consequences for press freedom and chastened by the blowback for its own aggressive leak hunts, the US under Obama had prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other US president. Restricted investigations into Assange and WikiLeaks. Quote, "We were stagnated for years," said Evanina. There was a reticence in the Obama administration at a high level to allow agencies to engage in certain kinds of intelligence collection against WikiLeaks, including signals and cyber operations. That began to change in 2013 when Edward Snowden, an NSA contractor, fled to Hong Kong with a massive trove of classified materials, some of which revealed that the US government was illegally spying on Americans. WikiLeaks helped arrange Snowden's escape to Russia from Hong Kong. Now let's remember, Snowden was also planning on going to Central or South America. He was only supposed to be stopping over in Russia, but they blocked his passports. So once he's landed in Russia, he could not leave. A WikiLeaks editor also accompanied Snowden to Russia, staying with him during his 39-day enforced stay at a Moscow airport and living with him for 3 months after Russia granted Snowden asylum. Snowden's still there today. He does talks all the time. He does webcam broadcasts. He talks about politics and news all the time. He's a very, very, very smart guy. In the wake of the Snowden revelations, the Obama administration allowed the intelligence community to prioritize collection on WikiLeaks, according to Evanina, now the CEO of the Evanina Group. Previously, if the FBI needed a search warrant to go into the group's databases in the US or wanted to use subpoena power or a national security letter to gain access to WikiLeaks-related financial records, that wasn't going to happen, another former senior counterintelligence official said. That changed after 2013 because they were so angry about Edward Snowden. People were calling him a traitor to his country. They were saying that what he did was terrible, all for showing us that our government had lied. James Clapper said under oath in front of Congress, no, we are not doing the mass collection of Americans' metadata. Not wittingly. We know now it was wittingly. From that point onward, US intelligence worked closely with friendly spy agencies to build a picture of WikiLeaks' network of contacts and, quote, and tie it back to hostile state intelligence services, which, as we showed from Pompeo, they were not able to do. The CIA assembled a group of analysts known officially as the WikiLeaks team and its Office of Transnational Issues with a mission to examine the organization, according to a former agency official. Still chaffing at the limits in place, top intelligence officials lobbied the White House to redefine WikiLeaks and some high-profile journalists as, quote, information brokers, which would have opened up the use of more investigative tools against them, potentially paving the way for their prosecution, according to former officials. It, quote, was a step in the direction of showing a court, if we got that far, that we were dealing with agents of a foreign power, end quote, a former senior counterintelligence official said. Among the journalists some U.S. officials wanted to designate as information brokers were Glenn Greenwald, then a columnist for The Guardian, where he actually helped break the Edward Snowden story. He was one of the main journalists involved in breaking that story that the U.S. government was lying to us about mass collecting our cell phone data. And Laura Poitras, a documentary filmmaker who had both been instrumental in publishing documents provided by Snowden. Quote, is WikiLeaks a journalistic outlet? Are Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald truly journalists? The former official said. We tried to change the definition of them, and I preached this to the White House and got rejected. I mean, they don't want to define people as journalists because journalists have protection. We've seen what they do to Julian Assange by not considering him a journalist. So I wanted to actually show this tweet from Glenn Greenwald, published today, I believe. CIA and Mike Pompeo were stopped by White House lawyers from carrying out their plot to kidnap or assassinate Assange, but the U.S. government continues to slowly kill him instead. In 2019, 2 years ago, doctors warned that what they were doing to him was killing him. He was in that embassy in Ecuador for like 8 years. He's been in Belmarsh prison for like 2 or 3 years. So he's been suffering in torturous conditions. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture says that he's being tortured, all for doing investigative journalism that revealed war crimes so big and so newsworthy that even the mainstream media had to cover it. In January, a UK judge rejected the US request to extradite Assange solely on the grounds that his health could not withstand it. Despite this, the Biden DOJ ignored all press freedom groups, appealed that decision, and demanded he stay in prison pending appeal. I mean, that's why this is not just a Trump and Republican thing. Yes, they are the ones who tried to kidnap and assassinate Assange. Yes, they're the ones who officially brought the charges forward. But as I've demonstrated, they've been spying on Assange. They've been trying to persecute Assange, trying to classify him as not a journalist so that they can persecute him for revealing war crimes. That's been going on under Democrats and Republicans. The US government is slowly suffocating, silencing, and killing someone solely for the crime of reporting documents that every major media outlet in the world determined was newsworthy. And a few in the US corporate media care because he's never been in their clique. And so now we have the only factions which support the ongoing imprisonment of Assange are CIA and their allies in the US and UK corporate media. Support for him is global and spans the ideological spectrum. And Glenn shows this, and I'm going to show you the videos here too. Support for him is global and spans the ideological spectrum. Listen to what ex-Brazilian President Lula da Silva said in 2020.
Bom dia, eu queria te dizer a você, a todos os líderes do mundo, ao Trump, ao primeiro-ministro inglês, ao primeiro-ministro francês e ao mundo inteiro o seguinte: o Assange deveria, nesse momento, estar sendo definido como um herói da democracia, como um herói da liberdade, como um herói da comunicação, como um cara que prestou bem à humanidade, sabe, denunciando os crimes de guerra cometidos pelos Estados Unidos da América do Norte. Eu até disse ontem que ele deveria estar sendo votado para ganhar o Prêmio Nobel da Paz. Porque se os democratas do planeta Terra, envolvendo todos os jornalistas, todos os advogados, todo sindicalista, todo político, não tiverem coragem de se manifestar, em defesa do Assange, para que ele não seja extraditado, significa que tem muitos democratas mentirosos. Significa que a liberdade de imprensa, tão cantada e versa explosa pelos donos dos grandes jornais, é mentira. Porque o Assange não merece ser punido. O Assange merece ser reconhecido como um homem que prestou enorme serviço à humanidade denunciando o genocídio das guerras, denunciando a mentira, a manipulação, às vezes, dos Estados Unidos, no maior território do mundo. O Assange não pode ser extraditado se as pessoas acreditarem em democracia. Sabe? Porque os jornais que deram a notícia não foram processados. Não foi preso nenhum dono de jornal. Como é que pode um jornalista ser preso e condenado por prestar informação que todos os jornais defendem?
So that was former Brazilian President Lula da Silva. I'm not going to talk about it much here, just going to mention it briefly. Maybe we'll do a whole video on it. He was actually arrested in a corruption scandal that turns out it was all a fraud, and the US had been involved in it. It helped Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right president now in Brazil, it helped him gain power. So, and Lula, you know, he's allied with communists in his country. He was allied in the past with Hugo Chavez and the government in Cuba, you know, the socialist government in those countries. He's defended them. He governed as a social democrat, but he's on the far left of the spectrum generally. And so now we're going to show the other end of the spectrum here. We've got, in full agreement with Lula, not just an outcome but rationale, is the most watched conservative in US media, Tucker Carlson, who repeatedly advocated for Assange's pardon and gave airtime to his family and supporters to do so. Only security state servants support this prosecution against Assange. Now let's see this video.
Julian Assange has been in jail for an awfully long time. He's now in jail in the UK. He was under house arrest in a foreign embassy in London. The US has now accused Julian Assange of violating the Espionage Act. This has been going on for a long time, and it shows how dumb we are that it took us a very long time, years, to ask the obvious question. What exactly did Julian Assange do wrong? Everyone, all good people hate Julian Assange. What was his crime exactly? Was he hacking into other people's computers? Was he stealing secrets from the U.S. government? No, actually, he was publishing things that other people sent to him. He was a journalist. He was an editor. That's literally true. Should you throw editors in jail because they embarrass you? Probably shouldn't. Not a good precedent to set, even if you don't like the person's politics. You should be against that. A wide group of people are against it, it turns out. We spoke recently to Pamela Anderson, who's trying to get a pardon for Assange. Watch this.
He needs to do the right thing. This is one of those moments in history, in his lifetime too, that he needs to make the right decision. And so it's all up to, President Trump. But he would really gain a huge following and a huge sigh of relief and gratefulness for so many people on the planet.
We spoke to Roger Waters of Pink Floyd about it. Tonight we're going to speak to Julian Assange's father and brother. John Shipton is his father. Gabriel Shipton is his brother. We're happy to have him on the show tonight. John Gabriel, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank
John,
you. Thank you.
First to you, this is a sincere question. What did your son do wrong exactly? What is his specific crime?
Well, no specific crime at all, Tucker. He's just offended some people in certain sections of Washington and consequently has faced 12 years now of persecution and harassment. And Julian, as you know, is not.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, we can see clearly that whether you are on the left, whether you are on the right, people agree that what's happening to Julian Assange is persecution of a journalist for doing investigative journalism work. Even the Obama administration, who ramped up some of these spying operations against him, even they weren't willing to bring the charges forward because of the precedent that it would set, that if they can get Julian Assange for publishing classified materials, what's to stop them from going for CNN? What's to stop them from going for New York Times? I mean, these corporate media outlets that just throw him under the bus and smear him, they're digging their own grave. They should be covering this case much, much more adamantly. And it's a shame that it takes somebody conservative like Tucker Carlson to be speaking out about this, while, the left-wing media, as they're accused of being by some right-wingers, they're not left-wing media. They are the corporate media. They are the capitalist media, and they don't care about Julian Assange because he embarrassed and exposed them for their corruption and war crimes. So let's continue with this article here. The Obama administration's policy was, quote, if there's published works out there, doesn't matter the venue, then we have to treat them as First Amendment protected individuals, the former senior counterintelligence official said. Quote, there were some exceptions to that rule, but they were very, very, very few and far between. WikiLeaks, the administration decided, did not fit the exception. So let's go down. I don't want to read all of this because this is, again, a very long article. By 2015, WikiLeaks was the subject of an intense debate over whether the organization should be targeted by law enforcement or spy agencies. Some argued that the FBI should take sole responsibility for investigating WikiLeaks, with no role for the CIA or the NSA. The DOJ, in particular, was very protective of its authorities over whether to charge Assange and whether to treat WikiLeaks like a media outlet. Then, in the summer of 2016, at the height of the presidential election season, came a seismic episode in the U.S. government's evolving approach to WikiLeaks, when the website began publishing Democratic Party emails. The U.S. intelligence community later concluded the Russian intelligence agency known as the GRU had hacked the emails. No evidence has been shown of this yet. In response to the leak, the NSA began surveilling the Twitter accounts of the suspected Russian intelligence operatives who were disseminating the leaked Democratic Party emails, according to a former CIA official. This collection revealed direct messages between the operatives, who went by the moniker Gucifers 2.0, and WikiLeaks' Twitter account. Assange at the time steadfastly denied that the Russian government was the source for the emails, which were also published by mainstream news organizations. So this is where I kind of get involved. This was crazy. So in 2016, I was heavily involved, as I've said before, in sharing a lot of these WikiLeaks emails on Twitter. I was one of the people going viral every day talking about it. I had messaged that Guccifer 2.0 account trying to get evidence of, they said, oh, we have Clinton Foundation emails. And I was like, can I see them? And they didn't provide them to me. And I asked them to share one of my tweets one time. And then, so shockingly, I had a BBC journalist DM me trying to accuse me of being a Russian agent or a Russian spy. And, I was 19 years old. I thought I was just doing investigative journalism. It scared the fuck out of me. And now I can see in hindsight, they were going for us. They were really going for us back then. Even so, Assange's communication with the suspected operatives settled the matter for some U.S. officials. The events of 2016, quote, really crystallized U.S. intelligence officials' beliefs that the WikiLeaks founder was acting in collusion with people who were using him to hurt the interests of the United States. No, we were revealing war crimes. After the publication of the Democratic Party emails, there was, quote, zero debate on the issue of whether the CIA would increase its spying on WikiLeaks, said a former intelligence official. But there was still, quote, sensitivity on how we would collect on them. And so I'm going to end this article here just because it's a really long article. We've been talking about it for a while. I want to talk a little bit more about the spying operations that ended up happening against Julian Assange during the Trump administration. So by Max Blumenthal of the Grayzone does great work. Mainstream U.S. reporters silent about being spied on by apparent CIA contractor that targeted Assange. Despite being spied on and having their privacy invaded by the UC Global firm that targeted Assange, reporters from major U.S. news outlets have said nothing in protest. This was in 2020, so over a year ago now, or almost exactly a year ago now. Spanish security firm apparently contracted by U.S. intelligence to carry out a campaign of black operations against Julian Assange and his associates spied on several U.S. reporters, including Ellen Nakashima, the top national security reporter of the Washington Post, and Lowell Bergman, a New York Times and PBS veteran. So see, this spying operation went beyond WikiLeaks associates. To date, Nakashima and her employers at the Washington Post have said nothing about the flagrant assault on their constitutional rights by UC Global, security company in charge of Ecuadorian embassy in London, which seemingly operated under the watch of the CIA's then director, Mike Pompeo. PBS, the New York Times, and other mainstream U.S. outlets have also remained silent about the U.S. government intrusion into reporters' personal devices and private records. Grayzone has learned that several correspondents from a major U.S. newspaper rebuffed appeals by WikiLeaks to report on the illegal spying campaign by UC Global, privately justifying the contractor's actions on national security grounds. So let's skip down a little bit to get to a report. Proof of UC Global's illegal spying campaign and the firm's relationship with the CIA emerged following the September 2019 arrest of the company's CEO, David Morales. Spanish police had enacted a secret operation called Operation Tabanco under a criminal case managed by the same national court that orchestrated the arrest of former Chilean military dictator Augusto Pinochet years before. Morales was charged in October 2019 by the Spanish court with violating the privacy of Assange and abusing his attorney-client privileges, as well as money laundering and bribery. A mercenary former Spanish Special Forces officer, Morales also stood accused of illegal weapons possession after 2 guns with the serial numbers filed off were found during a search of his property. So this guy spied on Julian Assange for the CIA, and we'll see later in this document, it's proven, it's ironclad. We know he did it. And he had illegal guns in his possession. The assassination angle is very much real here. The documents and testimony revealed in court have exposed shocking details of UC Global's campaign against Assange, his lawyers, friends, and reporters. Evidence of crimes ranging from spying to robberies to kidnapping, and even a proposed plot to eliminate Assange by poisoning has emerged from the ongoing trial. And so this was in 2020, a year ago, that the Grayzone was reporting on this. And we didn't hear anything from mainstream news. This news story from Yahoo yesterday, which basically just elaborates on this and confirms this with security officials, this was known. We knew this a year ago. In an investigation for the Grayzone, it's a very good article here, very in-depth. This reporter detailed how the Las Vegas Sands Corporation of Trump mega donor Sheldon Adelson functioned as an apparent liaison between UC Global and Pompeo's CIA, presumably contracting the former on behalf of the latter. It was the second time Adelson's company had been identified as a CIA asset. The first was in 2010, when a private intelligence report sponsored by gambling competitors alleged that his casino in Macau was sending footage of Chinese officials gambling so they could be blackmailed into serving as CIA informants. Again, this is what the CIA does. They should not exist. And so I'm not going to go much more in depth about this. I want to get on to the Daniel Hale story. But I mean, this just shows that the prosecution of Julian Assange by the US government continued today. The case had been dropped by the judge in the UK. They said that sending Assange to the US in our horrible prison conditions would be a death sentence for him. And yet, the Biden administration appealed the decision and is continuing the case. Biden in 2012 had called Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist. And you see Secretary of State Antony Blinken always talk about the free press. Look him up on Twitter. Look up Antony Blinken and free press. You'll see him always talk about the US government protecting the press. Yet he is continuing this very same persecution against a journalist simply for revealing evidence of US war crimes. And why? The US government doesn't want to be held accountable. The Biden administration is complicit. The Trump administration is complicit. The Obama administration is complicit. I mean, that just needs to end. I've written letters to my congressmen, Jamie Rashkin, and my senators, Chris Van Hollen and Ben Cardin, all in Maryland. None of them have talked back to me yet. I've called them, still haven't heard anything yet. I've written to the Bernie Sanders press team, haven't heard anything back yet. No US officials are talking about the case against Assange. Even though a year ago, during the Trump administration, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Jeff Merkley in Oregon, they spoke out about what was happening against Assange. But now that there's a Democrat in office, Nope.